It's time to raise the curtains. It's time to light the lights.
It's time to get things started on the genre, guys, tonight. Thank you for that send-off, Lorn. How are you?
Good.
You guys are glowing so bright. It's just like...
I think I'll put on my cute little sunglasses.
And if that doesn't give people a clue, why, look who's here.
Yes.
The expert.
I think people are pretty much tuned into the movie we're going to be covering today. I would think so, because we have Steve, a.k.a. Moral from Under a Rock. How are you, sir?
I'm not too bad.
Steve, I bet a lot of people have never seen you in the flesh, as they say, as opposed to in the green. By the way, this coming on the air right after St. Patrick's Day, the wearing of the green, or the not easy being green, is certainly apropos, isn't it?
The green puppet.
It would be. But he was originally purple, though, with green eyes. So we'll see.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, he evolved and changed and shaped, or what's the word I'm looking for? Adjusted through time to being more what I actually pictured. And
I think in light of all this Avenger stuff, you have to say morphed or mutated or something. I don't know. Anyway,
transitioned, I think, totally works for our day and age. So
yes. So on that note, audience, I think we've kept you in this dark long enough. We are covering today something that we would need Steve's expert opinion on, and that is the Great Muppet Caper. Yes, the Muppet Show. Is anyone surprised by this? Yes, no, maybe so. Have you guys ever watched this before? Probably the second coolest puppets out there. Obviously, Floral and Wilton are the first, and they are indeed the coolest. But we have to give the Muppets credit where the credit is due. And so this was, I think, was it Lauren? You're the one who suggested that we watch this one?
I did, yep.
And so, okay, tell us why.
Well, this is the Muppet movie that I remember from my childhood. I think this is probably the one that I watched the most. I do think the original Muppet movie is the best, but I only came to that opinion as an adult because for some reason I always remembered the jewel heist scene from this movie. That was the thing that stuck in my head. And so when I thought of the Muppet movies, this was always the first one that I thought of.
Huh. See, because to me, the big thing, other than the natural charm of the Muppets, was that wonderful, wonderful Paul Williams music. And this one, to me, fails by comparison because of the absence of those great songs.
Oh, I hadn't even noticed that. You're right. Interesting. Well, so before we get too deep into this, gentlemen, I'm presuming you've all watched the movie again. Steve, would you like to give a little bit of a recap on what you watched?
Oh, geez. So admittedly, I did have to break it up just because of time and schedule. So the first half of the movie doesn't actually really feel like the second half of the movie. So it really does have like that dividing line. However, so you're looking for like quick synopsis. Is that what we're going for?
Yeah. I usually ask Lorn or Lou to do this because I'm terrible at it.
Oh, dude, so am I. So here we are.
They go to England. There's thievery, and they save the day. There you go.
Damn,
great synopsis.
Wow.
So, but I was going to
highlight John Cleese and Robert Morley and Peter Ustinov and
this is because we started paying you by the word, isn't it, Lou?
I wish. And Diana Rigg shows up and is wonderful, as she always was.
Well, and that's kind of the thing that struck me at first, because obviously I hadn't seen this movie in forever, but I had forgotten the fact that it was basically a play. Like it was the Muppets not in character, so to speak, like somewhat in character, but not really, like not sort of adhering to the previous continuity of the Muppet Show, the previous movie, and all of that. And in this case, Kermit and Fozzie are twin brothers.
with a quite interesting looking father.
Yeah, that was amazing. And when I saw that at first, like it hadn't dawned on me that this was sort of quote unquote out of continuity, and I was like, is this the first time we've ever seen? Is that really their father? Like, wait, it made me question a little bit.
Well, the first thing that struck me was they're going to that great fashion center of the universe, London. not Milan, not Paris, but London. But, earlier, I guess, with Carnaby Street and that whole era, it was. But by this time, not so much. So that was kind of fun.
They do have that great line when they're being berated for missing the jewel thievery happening in plain sight.
Yep.
They run the story that there's these identical twin brothers now working for this newspaper. And when they're talking about how they're basically identical brothers, he says he doesn't see it. The newspaper editor says he doesn't see it. And Fozzie says, well, it's because I took my hat off. And he puts it on and goes, oh, yeah, there it is. There's lots of great gags like that in this movie.
Yeah.
And some massive, massive bits of crowd scenes and production numbers. I don't know how many hands were manipulating those puppets, but golly, they had a lot of bodies under the stage in some of these scenes.
But there was also a lot of animatronics. This is one where they really started to flesh out how do you get these robots working. And so this is what set the stage for Turtles and all of that kind of stuff. So it's exciting, like to see some of the stuff that they pulled out, but also a lot of just the very basic film tricks they pulled out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually, as I was watching today, there was like 5 or 6 scenes where they just filmed everything in reverse, filmed everything in reverse and then flipped it for the actual production and then dubbed over it. And like just very basic things that they did, but you catch the magic.
And a lot of the forced perspective stuff that later was used so effectively in Lord of the Rings. A lot of that, putting somebody up close in the foreground and everything in the background, making them look bigger or smaller, or some real basic movie making stuff with puppets.
I suspect that there were at least a couple of full body costumes that were used as well, just in a couple of scenes.
Specifically Piggy.
Yeah, when she was diving off of that water fountain, I'm like, nah, there's got to be somebody under there.
And riding the motorcycle a bunch of times, and when she was walking down the street, and so that, and like when you know how these things were all made, you know that as they're making these costumes, they're just busting a gut laughing the entire time because they acknowledge how silly it is and how obnoxious it is, but they're having so much fun as they're making these things. And so
now in this picture here, this is one of the best examples, I think. I want to see if you guys feel the same way. Does it disturb you guys when we see the Muppets' legs?
It does.
It always feels weird.
It feels weird because of the fact that you know that, well, these days it feels weird because you're like, it's just green screens and all that kind of stuff. When you see the Muppet legs in this, it's just the amount of robotics that are going on for such a low budget film is pretty astronomical. And the fact that they're marionettes, right? Like there's like 7 or 8 cranes all above him. And the fact that it was actually Jim Henson's son when he was a teenager that was responsible for this scene.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah.
So how would they have filmed this then? Like it is basically like a giant outdoor marionette. Like the strings are leading up to a crane then?
There's like 4 or 5 cranes they have going for all the different Muppets, and they're all on wires. So basically, the reason why this scene was made is because everyone fell in love when they saw Kermit riding in the first movie on the bike, and so then Jim was just like, we need to get them all riding a bike.
Oh my god!
And so voila, here you go.
Yeah.
And by the way, less people think that that's unusual. And by unusual, I mean for a guy to get an idea for a moment and then figure out how to get it in the movie. We did several weeks ago, North by Northwest. Hitchcock was carrying around an idea for a script for years called The Man in Lincoln's Nose. And when he finally talked to Ernest Lehman, he said, I want to start in New York and I want to wind up on Mount Rushmore and make it happen. That was all there was. And then they came up with everything in between. So tying these, hey, we can do this would be fun, into a story, into a movie, is also kind of a tradition, even if people aren't aware of it.
Well, a lot of the time, that's because you're thinking of these big set pieces that you want to have, and the plot comes later. You just want to have these particular action scenes that are your big, entertaining bits of the movie, and then you figure out how to string it all together to make it work story-wise.
Especially with something like this.
Yeah, this is wild. And I hadn't realized that this movie was as old as it was. It was filmed in 1980 in Great Britain and released in 1981. And I could have sworn this was a little like it had been made a bit later on. But again, time gets strange when I think about the 80s, I suppose.
But these movies have such an afterlife, and they show up again and again and again and again that they're timeless in a very good sense.
Like the only thing that doesn't remain timeless in these things is the cameos.
Yeah.
So those if you know who Columbo is, if you know who John Cleese is, then yes, you're like, okay.
And especially people like Robert Morley, who were very well known to the parents, but the kids never would have seen him. And that whole bit where they arrive in that pond. And by the way, I was telling Hangry a few weeks ago when we talked about this, that little village with the pond in it that they splash into because they literally fall out of an airplane to get into England. There is a very famous Avengers episode that Diana Rigg was in that pond. It's an episode, if you want to go watch an old Avengers episode, called Murdersville. And not to belabor it, but the plot was that the city had this little money-making scheme where if you wanted to kill somebody, if you paid them enough money and lured them there, you could kill them there and they wouldn't arrest you. And she's investigating and they catch her and they have a museum of medieval torture devices. And so they've got her on the end of a kind of a seesaw thing, like a ducking stool in that pond. And she always talked about making that episode and how difficult it was because it was really, I guess the word would be torturous as far as breathing. When I saw that pond, I said, holy, that's Little Storping in the Slough, which was the name they made up for it in that show.
But going back to the cameos and all that, I think one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about the Muppets.
Not that one. Not that one. For God's sakes, take that off the screen.
These Avengers, right?
No, I'd rather have Thanos than those people. Steed and Peel, please, the real ones.
I think it's important to frame just how culturally important the Muppets were in the 80s.
Yeah.
They were an incredible powerhouse of entertainment. And these cameos, you had people showing up on the Muppet Show as well. And they were fighting to get on there. It's like it was a badge of honor to be a cameo in a Muppet movie or on the show. It was
just as we talked about the people who were clamoring to be in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World and desperate to be part of it. And
which, by the way, for that movie, because this is the one thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
That movie, the best scene was the firefighters.
Yes.
That was the moment. Yeah. That moment.
But the other movie like that was Around the World in 80 Days, where literally Mike Todd invented the term cameo for those little guest shots.
Interesting.
There you go.
We should do that someday too.
We should. But no, going back to what you were saying, Lorn, absolutely. Like the Muppet Show was just this tour de force. Like it was, how do you even explain it, really?
Well, it would be hard to today, I think. But back then, it was the power of Jim Henson is akin to something like George Lucas at that time.
Yeah.
Henson outdid George Lucas in every way.
Oh,
I have no shame saying that.
No, them's fighting words
when
there.
You see what he accomplished, right? Because George Lucas created some cool characters, and obviously those characters transcended. However, the Muppets have gone far beyond that. Now, I know that the Star Wars is far more popular than the Muppets, but when you see what the Muppets actually is in comparison,
I think
there's a big difference between making a blockbuster movie every 3 or 4 years and coming into your house every week.
I think we may have the basis for another video.
I think so. Now listen, Steve, Yoda was all George. I got it.
No, actually, I think it depends on how you're arguing the point. If you're talking about because I think I'm not limiting just to Star Wars. I would also bring into the argument the technical achievements in moving cinema forward.
Oh, of course.
And
they all had such a healthy relationship that they were all stealing from each other, these guys. So
they loved each other. They absolutely adored each other. And so
they worked on each other's stuff. So
yeah. And so I think that time when the Muppet Show was on the air was an incredible time because I remember watching it with my parents, and it worked on both of those levels. It was kind of like the same kind of thing you would get from a Pixar movie before Pixar existed,
Well, it was like Shrek. You had those layers of humor.
But I can think of only 2 times, and maybe there were more, when Disney talked about pulling an attraction and the fan reaction was so negative they stopped. One was Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and the other was Muppets in 3D. So that if you're as big a sensation as Abraham Lincoln, you must be doing something right,
Well, I mean, look at the image I threw up on the screen there.
Yeah,
It's just Alice Cooper, Vincent Price, Marty Feldman. Like, what? Alice Cooper on a puppet show.
Well, yeah, but like I said, everybody wanted to be on that show. And what was amazing was that they pitched it in such a way, it's like Alice Cooper on the Muppet Show for kids. And, it's family friendly. This is something that every one of these characters that showed up, it was a badge of honor. It was something that was incredible for everybody that was involved. This is the kind of thing that I think is real TV and movie magic, because you don't often get entertainment that works on all of those levels for everybody who watches it.
But the reason why it worked so well is because they played to the strengths of whoever they had on, right? So when you hear the review, the memories of the early days when the Muppets first started on TV, and they had these nobodies, right? Like you listen to Steve Whitmire and to Dave Goelz talk about some of the stars who came in with the pompousness and the attitude and all this kind of stuff, and they're surrounded by these obnoxious characters just running around doing stupid things. Like, some of them broke and they just ended up having a good time. Some of them, though, just walked away. Like now, to their credit, they never say who that was, but they do say there are those people. There's only 2 or 3 of them, but when they left on a sour note, because they were trying to have fun. If you couldn't take yourself seriously,
of looking ridiculous.
Yes.
And that is a curse of some performers. The people who are great on that show are the people who said, this is what it is, let's go for it, and really went with the flow. Now, we know, like when you went back, Alice Cooper, let's remember, although he wasn't obscene like some rock and roll is now, this is a guy who ended his show with him beheading himself with a guillotine and blood spurting out, for God's sakes.
Oh, yeah.
Not exactly little kid fare.
The prototypical Marilyn Manson.
But on the other hand, Vincent Price, who had done very scary stuff, but also had done comedy scary stuff, and then memorably was Egghead on Batman, enjoying all of that. He had a great sense of humor about who he was. And of course, Marty Feldman, well, he was a funny man.
Very funny.
But look at this wonderful shot. See, you should tell us who all those people are, Steve, because you know who the human beings are.
Well, I know most of them. So
obviously Jim Henson in the center on top.
Center, and then Dave Goelz, I know, is down the bottom left there.
Right.
Frank Oz is top right. The lady, I know I know who she is. I don't know her name. The guy on the right, I want to say Richard something, but that's probably wrong. So the other 2 guys, I'm not confident on, but the girl there, she's like one of the only. She was the main female Muppet performer, for at least for the entirety of the show. Where did they find
these people? Were there people that just? I mean, there were puppet shows out there in the world, but
a lot of them were just people. So I think was it Dave Goelz? He was a computer programmer, and he wanted to.
Louise Gold.
Pardon?
Louise Gold. I'm seeing Louise Gold and Catherine Mullen, so it's one of those 2, I think.
Well, Catherine is the lady in the middle there.
Okay.
But Dave, like, he was a computer programmer, and somehow he grew up playing with puppets and all this kind of stuff, and somehow connected with Jim Henson. And then Steve Whitmire, who ended up taking over for Kermit and all that kind of stuff, and was Rizzo the Rat and all that. Like, he joined in because he wrote them, and he showed them one of his tapes. And his wife, actually, Jim Henson's wife, she typically actually was the vetting. Like, if she didn't think the people would fit, she wouldn't let them in. Like, they had to be just like fun-loving goof-offs. And the relationship, when you hear all of the stories from all these guys, they were always joking around and pranking each other outside of filming. Like they were actually friends. Like these guys actually got along. They weren't coworkers. They were friends doing work together. And because there's that whole level of intimacy too, where it was actually Catherine, I think you said her name was. I remember listening to an interview with her, and she says, like, yeah, obviously you show up to work clean, but your hands have been above your head for 6 hours with other people's arms around yours. So you are literally inside other people's armpits, contorting your bodies, where it's like very intimate, and you're there together. So there has to be this like extreme amount of trust. Like it has to be cohesive, where you just like, you have no pride. Like like you have to, as we talked about, you have to embrace the shame and just the hilarity, because out of it, you're going to get all these funny stories. But in the moment, like it's tense because you're very exposed.
But not only that, these people, as they knew each other as people, they knew how to draw stuff out of the other performers, not just do their own thing. In a lot of ensembles, people say, oh, that's a great ensemble, but everybody's out to get their own close-up and their own stuff, and to heck with everybody else. These people became very selfless and very generous performers because they knew each one's strengths and they played to those strengths.
And to this day, no one knows who Frank Oz is. People vaguely know Jim Henson's face. Yeah. Most people have no idea that it's Jim Henson that's at the table in The Great Muppet Caper.
Yeah.
No one knows that it's Jim Henson that walks into the house at the end of the Muppet Christmas movie. Like, people don't know that that's Jim Henson. And so, like, these guys, they didn't care about who they were. And what's interesting is you listen to them talk about the Muppets. The Muppets are their own people. Right. Like you don't perform a character. You have to be that character. And so
that's part of the wonderful thing about them, though, is that each of these characters is a little slice of part of their own psyches that they're getting out there. And I think that's why they come through that way, is that it's a part of them.
I don't know what you're talking about, because that's obnoxious. There's absolutely no way that you can pull from your own experience and do your own thing. Okay? So this is what we call life, and you gotta pretend. Okay? You can't look on the inside and pull it up and be like, this is me. Hey. Sorry. Anyone know that reference? Anyone? Come on. That was The Greatest Showman. Some of you guys didn't know that.
Yes.
So, thank you.
I understand you're going to be starring in job as Wolverine and Deadpool 4 because of your Greatest Showman abilities.
What are you doing? Why are you making yourself think?
Sorry, I'm trying to. Never mind.
So weird. Yeah, no.
And you know what's interesting about this? Getting back to what we were, and Wilton, I would love your opinion too. Sure. When people work together, especially with puppets, because they are not, their faces not on the screen. I remember reading very similar stories and seeing recently some great documentaries about the people involved with Thunderbirds and Stingray and all of those great super marionation shows. And they had the same kind of sense of company together, you know?
Uh-huh.
So I can see you in Lady Penelope, but we won't go there.
Oh, gee, a goat?
No. This
No.
is when things get a little blue.
No. Man,
Yeah.
So Wilton, what part of Steve's psyche are you?
do you really have to guess?
Well, I am curious. Has that Wilton voice always been inside your head?
I don't know. How we process things. It's kind of like once I came to life, I got naked, got exposed. So in front of everyone. That's just, and honestly, that's kind of more what it is, right? Once you put these things on, and you have the actual character, you're not just buying the puppet from the store. You're not buying something. When it's like its own thing, you literally are revealing that side of you. So, like my wife, truthfully, she hates Wilton with a passion.
Really?
Why?
Oh, you really have to guess. Because the reason that you might love him is probably the reason she hates him. But then like she thinks that Floral's really annoying, and she like just because he's so grumpy. But she loves Coco because Coco is just great with kids and all that kind of stuff. And these are all elements of my psyche that I am pulling out, and just like those experiences. Like, so Wilton, he's a little bit of me, a little bit of my uncle. And so, cause like growing up, my uncle, he was the biggest crap disturber you'd ever meet. And so, like, so when I was an adult and we were all at this family get together, everyone was just bickering and complaining and fighting. And I looked over at my wife and I was just like, I could say one word and unite all of them in one moment. And she's like, what? And just whispered into her ear, Trump. And she's like, don't. And I was like, it's so funny. So I get up and I walk over to my uncle, and he's just sitting there so annoyed with everybody. So I just kind of like lean back beside him and I just, Trump, and the twinkle in his eye. And he's like, Trump. And like nice and loud, and the whole room just blew up, and it was just, and everyone was united in that one moment, and it was so funny.
I love how you bring people together.
Right. And so,
but you know what you remind me of when you talk about that way that you become. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the actual stage production of Man of La Mancha, but as opposed to the movie that more or less just takes the story of Don Quixote. In the play, of course, Cervantes was in prison, and he starts in this prison, and he's trying to keep the prisoners from basically beating him up and taking his stuff, and he decides to entertain them by telling them this story that he actually wrote in prison, the real guy. And he starts to make himself up and transform himself into Don Quixote. And the first line he says is, I shall impersonate a man. And then he begins to describe him, and he literally on stage while the audience is watching puts on the wig and puts on the makeup and becomes, the knight Don Quixote. And that whole idea of transforming yourself visibly is a pretty special thing that can only happen with you got to be somebody great that you're turning into, but you got to be somebody great that you are from whom it comes.
Well,
I say it in deference to gender issues with all of your guys, but
I mean,
I said guys, sorry.
Speaking of putting on wigs and makeup, I'm just looking at the featured actors on the Muppet Show, and that it included Liberace. I don't think I ever saw that.
Like if you look at the first season, it's a bunch of nobodies. Second season, they started getting in some like the occasional bigger name. Fifth season, it was like only big names that today most people would still recognize. And
by the way, that progression probably added to the longevity of the show, because it became who are they going to have this week?
But here's the thing, and this is why you when it comes to Jim Henson, you can respect him. He's the one that pulled the plug on the show. It wasn't anyone else. He's like, you know what? We're running short on ideas. I want to experiment with movies, and it was done, right? Good. So he disappointed everybody by not running the show into the ground, and thus that show is actually looked on favorably because he ended it when he should have.
Well, I mean,
he didn't jump the shark, as they say.
It's basically like Bill Watterson and Calvin and Hobbes, essentially, right? But
yes,
I'm going to list off some of these actors who've appeared. So you've got Steve Martin, you have Harvey Korman, Sylvester Stallone, Julie Andrews, Carol Burnett, Liza Minnelli, Christopher Reeve, Raquel Welch, Dom DeLuise, Bob Hope, Don Knotts, Lena Holmes, Vincent Price, Elton John, Diana Ross, Harry Belafonte, Kenny Rogers, Linda Ronstadt, Paul Simon, Debbie Harry, John Cleese, who was in the movie as well, Roger Moore, Mark Hamill, as both himself and Luke Skywalker. And the interesting thing that they note here, though, is that no guest ever appeared twice on The Muppet Show, although John Denver appeared both on the show and in 2 specials. John Denver and the Muppets. Interesting.
Yeah.
Grandma's feather bed. That's probably one of my favorite Muppet Show episodes.
So on that note,
back to the movie, which of course is Cleese also is. So there's a double.
Which that scene, I think I loved that scene probably more than most of the other ones throughout the movie.
Well, and you think about what he's brought to other movies, certainly the Harry Potter stuff, but the one that I'm always reminded of in a movie we should definitely do is Silverado, where he's this British guy who's a sheriff in a town in the West, which happened. But he came into these things and brought his own little twist, but didn't take over the show and make it the John Cleese thing, Oh yeah, here's all the press. I love that. The pork pie hat and the camera with the big flash bulbs and all of that front page stuff.
Mhm.
Or Ace in the Hole stuff for the genre guys.
That is true. Well, one thing that's interesting is that I watched this movie with my son, my older son, and it was really interesting because we watched a little bit of the Muppets before, but we haven't really ever gotten into like the show and doing marathons on it and whatnot. But he was enthralled the entire time, and I can never tell what he's going to be into and what he isn't. But he loved it, and he actually said to me after, he's like, "I really, really like this." But going back to what we were discussing a little earlier about how some parts of the film hadn't aged well, when they were in the dark room, he's looking at me, he's like, "Daddy, what are they doing?" And I'm like, son, before the iPhone. It's like, what happened to the photo? Well, now.
Oh God, I saw a meme today where the lady says, I asked my daughter to hand me the phone book and she looked at me with disgust and handed me her iPhone. Well, the bug is dead, the phone is ruined, and she's really upset. Once upon a time, we actually had film in the cameras. Yes, those were the days.
I know.
Well, something that I think is sweet about the Muppets is kind of what you just said, where he became enthralled with this thing. I kind of got reacquainted with the Muppets when COVID first broke out. My son was kind of forced to stay home from school, and right around that time, they put out a video on YouTube of Kermit singing The Rainbow Connection, and it wasn't from the movie, it was them redoing it. And I watched that with my son, and it was such a sweet scene and kind of a special thing. You know, at that time, nobody really quite knew what this was yet. Everybody was still scared of it. It was right at the very beginning. And it was a way to kind of come together with him. And then while he was home, that's when we started watching the Muppet movies. And it was that was one thing that I was grateful for about being forced to stay home, was that I got to rediscover these things with my kid. And that was a really special thing.
And by the way, in this age when we hear that people are worried and literally calling theater operators about certain movies from a certain mouse, say, is it safe to take my kids, that they never would have done? The Muppets were always a safe place, and you didn't have to wonder. They were always some place where you knew you'd have a laugh, you'd have maybe the occasional tear.
Pushed the line. They pushed the line, especially that first movie,
yes, but
pushed the line.
But you knew if they pushed, they weren't going to push too far.
Yeah,
and that you were going to. It was, once upon a time to happily ever after, as I always say, is every good story, and the in between is the in between.
Well, in this movie, they do that at the very beginning of the movie. They tell you immediately, this is what the movie is, and it's all going to end up all right. And yes. I thought that was kind of brilliant, is that you already set the stage. It's like, look, there's going to be chaos, there's catastrophe, but we're going to solve it pretty easily, and you're going to have a good time. And that's a great way to frame a kid's movie. It's like, look, we're just here for fun.
Especially when you're going to throw your main characters out of an airplane.
My son
and not have them worry about it.
He was scared, so he didn't see the first half of the movie, but he saw the last half. And so when the guy starts throwing the Muppets out of the window or the door, he's like, he's like his eyes go big. He's like, oh no! It's so funny. My wife and I were just like dying laughing.
You should say there was another movie after this, so obviously they don't die. So
he's 2.5. He doesn't really have that frame.
Well, that's 2.5. Yeah, I can imagine.
And that kind of like sort of relates to a bit of an observation that I had, and I don't know if I'm off base on this, but it felt as though the humor in this particular movie was less geared towards it, like less geared towards adults or less sly. Like it felt more on the nose, and I don't know if that's just me.
It's definitely more slapstick.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more physical, this movie, but that's because in the first movie and throughout the show, they had to learn how to make the gags because they were so limited by the physical stuff.
Yes.
Right? So it was all audible. Whereas,
so this was let's take all the various tricks we've learned and put them in one movie and see what happens.
And like all the jokes that we've always wanted to make.
Right.
Let's make it. So,
and you know who we have?
And a lot of dancing.
We haven't mentioned Charles Grodin, which is kind of surprising because he is a major character in the movie and he's a famous, funny actor. And he kind of gets, in a way, lost in the shuffle in this thing. which is not because of him. It's just the way
You know
it
why though?
goes.
You and Lorn might know who he is, but I don't know.
But in that era, he was a very, very busy
I'm sure he
actor.
was, but
I don't remember if this was before or after Midnight Run, which was really his big breakout as a feature.
Yeah,
But,
you don't know Charles Grodin. Okay, well, he was famous for being like his persona was a grump, and I mean he was always in character there, especially like when he was appearing on late night talk shows and things like that. He was always playing this grumpy kind of a guy.
Okay.
What I like about what they do here is with him playing the villain, and I think brilliantly falling in love with Miss Piggy, which I think is
that.
it's hilarious because he just sells it. But
he really does.
He's kind of doing with his henchwomen, his fashion model burglars. They're sort of doing an evil Charlie's Angels.
These angels, yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of makes it brilliant for the time period that it's in.
But here's the thing too, though. Like, you make this movie today, everyone's be like, of course, all the main thieves are women, right? There, they were breaking the stereotype.
That's true.
Yeah, I think the whole thing. This is probably why the heist scene is the one that sticks out in my memory from when I was young. Is that to me, it looked like Daring Do. It was a little bit like the Tom Cruise scene in the first Mission Impossible when he comes into the vault. Because as a kid, I'm totally buying this as a heist. I'm not really necessarily seeing it as the humor.
Oh my goodness! I just looked up his entire filmography. Do you know the very first movie he was in when he was a little child? Believe it or not, uncredited, he is a quote-unquote drummer boy in Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954. And I mean, 10 years later, he's in a movie called Sex and the College Girl. And then he's doing lots of TV shows, The Virginian and Felony Squad and The Guns of Will Sonnet and The Big Valley. And then Rosemary's Baby. And of course, the big one, I guess, really, I should have said, it was Heartbreak Kid was a big hit for him in 72. And he was in King Kong and Heaven Can Wait. He had a big part in. And then this, and this was after, let's see. And then after this, this is a guy who just worked. He went from The Great Muppet Caper to an episode of Laverne and Shirley. Okay. Wow. So, and The Woman in Red and American Playhouse and Midnight Run, I think was probably his best movie with De Niro, 1988. Cranium Command. He was the left brain.
Can I get your guys' thoughts on this one thing, though? When it comes to Piggy, do you think that this is the first movie where modern Piggy is born? Like, because Piggy throughout the Muppet series, obviously she evolves. The Muppet movie, she evolves a little bit more. I feel like this is the movie where Piggy, Frank Oz, and Piggy, they kind of figured it out. Because you see just the personality really become a little bit more, far more selfish. She's
extra.
If that's possible.
Right. So and that's the thing. So I feel like it's in this one. This is what defined Miss Piggy. Because this is, like, honestly, I think this is her movie. This isn't.
It is.
Because this is where she shines. So I think that's honestly, that's for me one of the biggest takeaways from the film is this is where her character really be just defined. They figured it out. This is who she is. But that's where I give this guy credit, is because he obviously helped pull that out. Right. Him and Frank Oz, it must have been just busting a gut. How much? Like when she's like, okay, Bob, and just like punches him on the chest and like as she walks away,
Steve, I'm going to give you one of those 6 degree moments. Do you know the name of the town where his house was, where he passed away in 2021? Wilton, Connecticut.
Oh, really?
Yes. How's that for a connection?
One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when they're having the synchronized swimmer scene, and you have this song being sung, and then he comes up in the oval, and it's Charles Grodin supposedly singing. And then Kermit comes in and they're both serenading Piggy in this fantasy that she's having in her mind. And then at the end of the thing, when it's revealed that she's fallen off the platform into this little water feature, she's yelling at him that you can't even sing. You were dubbed. And it's so obvious when you're watching it. It's like, that is a great gag. That is a beautiful gag. Funniest one in the movie, I think.
And it's funny because it's simultaneously a satire of Busby Berkeley and all those movies, and of the Olympic synchronized swimming thing with the spit curls.
Yeah, but that's
Sorry, that's the biggest photo I can get.
Yeah.
No, that's fair, but, which is a good one because that captures it. But it's that's scene.
Piggy's whole personality right there. Is
Yes.
that's she's the center of the world, and both of these men love
And
her.
that thing with the sparklers in her hair, that's Esther Williams did that in a movie, $1 Million Mermaid, I think it was called, at MGM. Came up out of the water with the sparklers sparkling. So.
Well, even that first dance scene at the supper club, not the restaurant that they were looking to go to, that struck me as being a bit of a riff off the old Marilyn Monroe.
Sure.
Well, they rip off everything.
Yeah,
but that's the thing. Like, and they did it shamelessly.
Well,
but they did
let's
it in
not
their
call it a ripoff. Let's call it an homage.
Okay, they stole. They made it their own, and that's the thing. Like, they made it their own. So it's something where you'd be like, "Oh, that's funny." Right, like because your mind's going to go to all of these things, but yeah, no, but that whole pool scene though, like because I've listened to like a bunch of Dave Goelz and Steve Whitmire and all those guys talk about all of those things, and that movie, that's the scene that like it was the hardest thing to do because, and I just did a quick look up on the scene just to refresh myself, but Frank Oz took scuba lessons for that scene.
Wow.
So because he spent literally a week under the water, so he's just like under there the whole time under the water, scuba diving, trying to puppet, and like it's just so phenomenally well done. And because they needed to make the pig waterproof, she became super breakable. So they went through something like 200 pigs, and different when you consider all the limbs and everything that broke throughout the thing, and it's just, and again, when you see everything that they go through to just create that one shot where it's just absolutely hilarious. Like even in Muppet Christmas Carol,
yeah,
when they did because obviously they took what they learned from Miss Piggy and they did that scene of the Ghost of Christmas Present. Like that puppet is filmed in baby oil, like a 60-liter thing of baby oil. So they're in in this baby oil trying to puppet this thing. And so because the oil though, it was corrosive, so it would eat this puppet and it would destroy it. And so like, but it's all this stuff they learned how to manipulate and build on it and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so a lot of people don't know that the Ghost of Christmas Past is filmed in baby oil.
Wow. Well, guys,
no.
On the subject of that, no, actually, that's a terrible segue. But let's talk about what we liked and what didn't sort of fall.
Yeah, this is what we do to wind up, Steve, every week. What was your favorite thing? What was your least favorite thing?
Yeah. So we'll start with why don't we start with you, Steve, of the movie?
Start with someone else. That makes
all right. Well, let's start with Lorn here.
I think the thing that I liked the best is, and I realized it watching the movie this time, is the dance scene in the supper club. Because as I was watching it, I realized I kind of figured that might be the most technical scene to do, because you have all of these actual dancers that are being choreographed along with the puppets, and you have so many camera shots. It's not a continuous dance scene. You would have to stop and reset up shots and sequentially make this whole thing work and synchronize with the music. And that seems to me like that must have been an absolute nightmare to do.
God bless storyboarding.
My gosh, that had to be incredible to try and make work. But the thing that I don't like about the movie is I think I agree with you that the music here is nowhere near as good as the Muppet movie. The music suffers a little bit. I think there may be too many music numbers in this one. And
they were pretty
as an adult, you can see some of those things that I wouldn't have noticed as a kid. Like we're talking about different Muppets in different scenes to accommodate the type of shot that they're trying to do. And the bike scene, while I understand why they wanted it, I find it disturbing because I just don't like seeing their legs. So,
so he liked the dances, but he didn't like the legs. Okay, that'll work.
Lorne's not a leg guy. We've learned that.
You took the joke right out of my mouth.
I am, but not when it comes to Muppets.
That's
or Lilu.
That's a very
anyway.
Lou, what about you?
Well, to me, the greatest parts of this movie are these masses and masses of characters all on screen at the same time.
Yeah.
And they're not just standing there going along with the music. They're all doing something interesting and catching your eye. And you could watch those sequences over and over and find something new all the time. I think the plotting is weak. And the big thing to me, aside from the fact that, again, I'm sorry, but if you have Paul Williams do the first one, you don't have anybody else do anything else but him if you can. I think some of the guest stars were not used to their best advantage, particularly Peter Falk. I think that's
Brilliant.
I think it was brilliant, but I just think it went on way too long. It was the same joke over and over and over again. And I sat there going, they couldn't think of anything else for him to do but this, or they couldn't do it quicker. But I think they feel a certain obligation to each one of these people to give them even that little bit of dialogue with Robert Morley at the beginning when they splash in the pond is like 3 lines too long to me. So those things to me kind of hang up the show. It's like everybody stop while we watch the guest star. And I think that's a flaw that they didn't have in the show when they had the guest stars.
How did you feel about Oscar the Grouch?
I'm just here for that cameo.
Yeah, right.
In my case, I think you guys are both on point in terms of a lot of those cameos, especially in this day and age, with people who aren't that familiar with them, felt like they went on a bit long. Like Peter Falk, I was kind of sitting there watching it, and I was like, "Yeah, this is, I don't know." There were a number of parts in this film that did fall a bit flat for me, and it wasn't. It almost felt as if there were, like you said, Lorn, a bit too many musical numbers. But what I liked the most about this, and this is completely subjective, and this is going to be funny, is to hear their original voices again, because I have never ever liked the replacement they got for Kermit after Jim Henson passed away. Like,
You didn't like
Steve?
I've always been like a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to that. And like, he's good, but it just, to be able to hear the original voices again, that really kind of tickled my nostalgia bone, so to speak. Yeah. So what about you, Steve?
All right. So, I mean, I don't know how to respond to that, though, other than like the new guy doing Kermit should just be put in a hole. But no, Steve Whitmire captured the person like Jim Henson, and that's why I loved how he operated. But anyway, so that being said, my favorite things about this was Piggy and her growing and becoming her own character, but also that the slapstick was really fully physically brought out in this one. But also to mess with you guys, if you guys didn't know, this one actually did win a Academy Award for the music. So
must have been a slow year.
Well, it lost to King Arthur, I think, if I remember correctly, or Arthur or something like that. Anyway, but it's also Jim Henson's first movie that he actually directed. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of cool things that are about this movie that are big wins, I think. For me, the things that sucked, the opening was too slow.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, and just the transitions and stuff into the different scenes, it lagged on. And then too, the jewel heist scene, it could have been better edited, I think. While great,
One thing I wanted to bring up about that jewel heist scene that I noticed here is I think they were actually using set pieces from the Death Star for the computer screens.
Yeah,
the control panels and the control panels, and it looked to me like a scomp link. I'm almost certain that they got some props from George Lucas for that.
I thought I was going crazy when I saw that.
Real ones, or do you think they were doing it to pay homage to it and be fun?
I think they were real. The scomp link to me looked like it came straight off of the Death Star set.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I thought it was. I was like, no, that can't be it.
But when was Return of the what's it called?
A New Hope was 77, Empire Strikes Back was 80, and Return of the Jedi was 83.
So, and when was this filmed?
Filmed in 80.
80. Yeah. So it's totally 100% plausible.
All right.
Wow.
Well, thank you very much, guys. That was a real treat. It was nice walking down memory lane, talking about the Muppets. Hopefully, we'll be able to see them have a resurgence in the future. Like, I think these characters really are timeless, and they've they've not really. I guess Disney really hasn't been using them to their full potential.
Wait. Are you daring to say that Disney has not capitalized on some great IP they own?
I know it's kind of
Sacrilege, sir.
crazy.
Sacrilege.
I'm sorry, it's a bit out there, but hopefully one day in the future we'll see that, because it's a shame. Like, these characters, I think, are just unstoppable, and they really deserve to have more screen time, even in this day and
They could
age.
be unstoppable.
They could
are
be.
very stoppable because look at Disney. Look what they've done.
They're unstoppable when they're done right. How about that?
Yeah. And so like, because it was the 2011 movie that reinvigorated my love for them. And
I like the 2011 movie.
like Steve Whitmire, he's not a huge fan of that movie because Kermit would never abandon everybody the way he did. So like there are character issues, but they do it for the movie, and that's where it's kind of redeemed in the other one, because they're like, we just finished making a movie, and away they go, and you're just like, okay, so like, and that's why actually Steve Whitmire, he actually prefers Muppets Most Wanted, because there everyone's actually their own characters, even though the story sucks. All the characters are actually their own. So
I think Russian imposter Kermit is hilarious.
but he's the guy that took over for Kermit. So if you kept him as Constantine, that'd have been fine. He has no business being Kermit. But the reason why they canned Kermit was Steve Whitmire is because he actually cares about the Muppets. So
I think that's why Frank Oz is so upset with them too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, and that's why like you look at like Dave Goelz, and I keep thinking like every time you see that guy doing anything, like even as Gonzo, it's lifeless. Like if you see the Haunted Mansion thing, you're just like, there is no life in there. Like he's not Dave Goelz anymore. Like all of his friends are gone. And you're just like, this sucks.
It sounds like you're talking about the Star Wars sequels there, Steve.
Yeah. But that's for another day.
That is indeed.
And speaking of another day,
note,
Steve, we would like to thank you for being here. You brought so much insight into this. I wish I could say we'd have you back next week, but since you are licensed to puppet and not to kill, that would be a problem.
Yes. Don't be too shaken and not stirred by that.
Or I might say to you, that's a Smith & Wesson and you've had your 6. And that doesn't tell everybody what we're doing next time. I don't know what will. But
pretty sure that's Gone with the Wind.
That's it.
Austin Powers. No, Steve, thank you so much. This was fantastic. It was so great to have you on. And, we're hopeful, like we'll see if we can circle back again and find something to perhaps bring you back in the future as a guest star. You're the first guest star I think we've had on the Genre Guys.
Yes.
So
I noticed, and it's an honor.
Members, let us know your thoughts down below. What did you think?
Be sure to watch Floral. Tell them all about where to find you, Steve.
Yeah. Pitch yourself.
Sure. Floral from Under a Rock. You can join us there. Wednesdays, we have our main show. So that's what we're doing. And I'm just trying to wrap my brain around skits and all that kind of stuff. So here's the thing. If you are a member of anywhere, I don't care who you are. If you have ideas for things just to do to Plug Pro or whoever else, or just stupid things for me to do, give me ideas and I will take them and try to use them and abuse them appropriately and go from there. So,
and as good as Steve is, he has some wonderful puppeting co-stars with him too from just great people. I was on the show once and had a grand old, I felt like, as I told you at the time, a guest star on the Muppet Show. So.
It was awesome.
And the goal is eventually, hopefully by God's grace, to make a movie. And I have the idea. I have the visuals. And that's the thing. I have all those scenes, as we were talking about before. I have the visualization of how these things will play out. And it's absolutely flippin' hilarious in my mind. But I just need someone that wants to write a script. So it would be a Western.
Oh. All right. Oh. Well, please leave your comments and thoughts down below. And if you're particularly good at script writing, let us know. At the same time, please tell us what you thought about our Genre Guys episode today. If you are a big Muppet fan, if you've never heard of the Muppets before, what your thoughts are on the film, if you've seen it. And if you haven't, you really should go and see it. And on that note, we will say farewell and adieu until next time. And thank you once again for tuning in. Have a great night, day, evening, wherever it is, whatever time it is. Hope it's a good one.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.